All right, I've sat back and I've watched everybody have their statements about violence in Chicago and Donald Trump bringing troops. And I'm going to tell you where I stand. And if you know me, you already know where I stand. But let me first get this out. I am sick and tired of hearing Brandon Johnson and his paid comrades to go around saying violence is low to try to pad his record. It is utter bullshit. And it is a disrespect to our seniors who are being shot up in front of their senior buildings, to our children who are being shot up walking to school. It is a disrespect to all of the families that are constantly being shot each and every day. Chicago has a violence problem. And the only reason why violence is down a little bit is because violence went up during COVID. People lost their jobs. COVID had folks in the house, economic insecurity. We know why violence was high during COVID. It was higher in every city around the country. So now that folks are back to work and we are post-COVID, violence have come down a bit. But if you look at right before COVID, where 500 people were killed in 2019 and over 2,000 people were shot, we're right back at those numbers. Almost 300 people have been shot this year, and 300 people have been killed this year, and 1,300 people have been shot. That means that we're on par to go back to the numbers where we were before COVID happened. So stop this bullshit rhetoric.
What's going on, everybody? Thank you all for joining me today. If you haven't already, please make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you're new to the channel. Most importantly, please make sure that you are following me on Telegram at TD Media Group to help circumvent social media censorship and shadow banning. And with the introduction out of the way, let's get into today's news. And today we have to head on over to the People's Republic of Chicago to discuss Emperor Brandon Johnson and idiot governor-in-chief JB Pritzker, right? Because they had a little get together, you could say a press conference yesterday in the city, where they were just basically telling Donald Trump, don't come to Chicago. They were talking real tough. And I don't want to spend as much time on that as much as I really want to speak on today how Brandon Johnson made himself look like the complete idiot that he is on MSNBC. Oh, it was horrific. Joe Scarborough made this man look like a fool without even trying. And why was that? It's because of Brandon Johnson's refusal to just be honest and give common sense answers when it comes to crime in Chicago and just crime overall. And the answers that he gives, and we're going to get into that later, right? But those answers that he is giving is the reason why Democrats as a whole are literally losing voters by the millions. And when I say that, I'm not being overly dramatic. That's not me being extra. It's an actual fact that Democrats are losing millions upon millions of voters by the day. Check this clip out, and then we'll carry on.
In all 30 states that track party registration, we're putting on the screen the data. It shows altogether Democrats have lost 2.1 million voters. Republicans have gained 2.4 million. That's a deficit that you have of 4.5 million voters.
That is crazy. A 4.5 million voter deficit is wild. And this is across the board. There are 30 states that keep track of that data. Across all 30 states, including 4 critical swing states, it's a clean sweep. The Republican Party is annihilating Democrats. Nobody wants to affiliate with them anymore. And people just are outright sick and tired of them because they stand opposed to any and everything that the average American citizen wants. And they continue to show and prove themselves to be more pro-illegal immigrant than pro-American citizen, outside of the fact that they're pro-crime and anti-police, right? And what people want is safety. And this is what they're against. And this is the genius behind Donald Trump's crackdown on crime, is that he's showing you in real time that these Democrats are lunatics. And if you leave it up to them, the streets will be filled with crime and homeless folks everywhere. And they will never get down to the bottom of just doing the work of removing these people off the streets as they should. What I want to do next is that I want to pivot over to a video from my man Stephen Miller recently when he was speaking, and he addresses very eloquently the current state of the Democrat Party. And I want to share this with you guys next, before we go into Brandon Johnson and JB Pritzker, but primarily Brandon Johnson, because this is just a great setup video to segue us into the foolishness of these DNC lunatics out of Chicago.
The Democrat Party does not fight for, care about, or represent American citizens. It is an entity devoted exclusively to the defense of hardened criminals, gangbangers, and illegal alien killers and terrorists. The Democrat Party is not a political party. It is a domestic extremist organization. Look at Chicago. They've shut down the police department. They've handcuffed law enforcement. And as President Trump says, they have turned the streets of Chicago into a bloody killing field. Here in Washington, D.C., before President Trump launched the federal law enforcement liberation in D.C., there was a murder on the streets of this town every other day. Body after body after body after body. That was Washington, D.C. Residents were afraid to go to restaurants. They were afraid to go into entire neighborhoods. They were getting carjacked right and left, robbed and beaten. That was Washington, D.C. Now we're 2 weeks homicide free, the safest the city has ever been in its entire history. And the Democrats, instead of jumping up and down and saying, thank you, President Trump, thank you for saving our lives, thank you for saving our cities, thank you for scrubbing away all the graffiti, the trash, the homeless encampments, the druggies, instead of cleaning up the city, instead of thanking him for that, they're saying, President Trump, how dare you save our lives? How dare you save our children? How dare you save our city? The Democrat Party, Sean, that exists today, it disgusts me. I do not recognize that party, Sean.
I couldn't have said that any better. I couldn't have said any better. And don't let it go over your head what he just stated here. There hasn't been a single homicide in D.C. in close to 2 weeks. He said 2 weeks. If I'm not mistaken, it's 11 days to be exact. We're not quite at 2 weeks yet. But if you want to round it out, that's fine. I don't think people understand how unprecedented that is. Turn on the local news in any major metropolitan city here in Los Angeles, Chicago, NYC, Baltimore, wherever. There is a murder in your city every day, if not a murder or 2 or 3 or 4 in your city every day. 11 days straight without a single murder is unheard of. That is unheard of. That lets you know that all of the criminals and the would-be criminals are either locked up or afraid to come outside, as they should be. Now let this sit on your mind for a moment. What happens once a Democrat gets back into office as president? They're going to unleash chaos back onto the streets of DC. And this also goes to the brilliance of Trump and him going after, crime specifically, and pointing the spotlight at Democrats with how crazy they are. Because eventually a Democrat's going to get into office. Maybe J.D. Vance, or what's my man's name? Marco Rubio, will win the presidency, in 2028. Maybe they'll be able to carry that over into 2032, I believe, right? And let's just say after the 2032 election, a Democrat gets in. The genius behind all this is that unless Democrats uphold Trump's strategy to eliminate crime, the moment a Democrat gets in, particularly in DC, crime is going to skyrocket like a SpaceX, ship headed to Mars. It is going to skyrocket, and it'll make Democrats look utterly insane. But then again, at the same time, we might not ever come to the realization to see that in real time, that Democrats look utterly insane, because once again, they're losing voters by the millions. And it's because of their nonsense rhetoric and nonsense policies that they refuse to let go of. And with that, let's pivot over to Chicago, right? Because like I said, recently, they had a little get together, a little powwow outside. And it was just a lot of, just fear mongering as usual. Donald Trump wants to bring military armed men to the streets of Chicago so that he can intimidate his political opponents and, put you all in the gulags and nonsense like that. Listen to what JB Pritzker had to say. I want to get through Pritzker quickly because I really just want to focus on Idiot Johnson today. But this is some of the nonsense that came out of JB Pritzker's mouth.
Donald Trump wants to use the military to occupy a U.S. city, punish his dissidents, and score political points. If this were happening in any other country, we would have no trouble calling it what it is, a dangerous power grab.
Okay, you can shut up now. I played this video I'm going to play next, in my last video that I uploaded recently on Maryland. You tell me, does this look like a dangerous power grab? Let me show you guys this video right quickly. Look at this. New people are now taking photos with the National Guardsmen in DC. This comes after 8 consecutive days with 0 homicides. Well, it's 11 now. And does this look like tyranny? I don't know. You tell me if this is tyranny. You tell me if this is what, Nazi Germany looked like. Because if you let a Democrat tell it, because they have now become the foremost authority on World War II and Hitler and whatnot. Is this what that looks like? You tell me. People are running excited to take pictures with the National Guardsmen in DC. That's how good they feel in DC. That's how safe people feel in DC. All right. They want autographs and photos now. That's how good they feel. But if you let, going back to, this guy here, Pritzker tell it, if you let JB Pritzker tell it, tyranny is being unleashed across the country, and now in comes, the emperor of the People's Republic of Chicago, Brandon Johnson. We all know what Mr. Brandon Johnson, and look, you could see him over here on the side looking like an idiot that he is. With Brandon Johnson, everything's racist, right? I'm not going to play, the full 1 minute clip that I did have. He spoke longer than a minute, and I had a 1 minute clip that I was going to play, but I just, for the sake of time and, for our mental health, I'm not going to play the whole minute, but I just want to play this one clip where Brandon Johnson referred to, jail as being racist, right? Because according to Brandon Johnson, everything's racist, going to court is racist. Police is racist, cash bail are racist, going to jail is racist, the whole just prison system, judicial system in and of itself, everything is just racist, according to Brandon Johnson, right? And we have to do away with all of it and let crime just run wild. So let's get into this clip next.
We cannot incarcerate our way out of violence. We've already tried that. And we've ended up with the largest prison population in the world without solving the problems of crime and violence. The addiction on jails and incarceration in this country, we have moved past that. It is racist, it is immoral, it is unholy, and it is not the way to drive violence down. We cannot return to the same failed strategies that got us here in the first place. Under the previous presidential administration, we requested more federal resources to address gun violence in our city. We continue to make that same call. We have made significant progress on our own, but there is so much more that we can do if we had real support from the federal government.
For someone who claims that everything is racist every time he opens his mouth and always has to make it a point to remind you that he's a black man in America every time he opens his mouth, you would think that he would be celebrating the fact that in a place like DC, where there hasn't been a homicide in 11 straight days, you would think that he would be celebrating that, given the fact that let's just be honest, 10 out of 10 times the victim is black. 10 out of 10 times. But we're not doing that. We're not playing that game 9 out of 10 times just to preserve some feelings. Knock it off. 10 out of 10 times, okay, the victim is black. 10 out of 10 times. You would think that he would support that. You would think that he would be behind that. right? For as blackety black as Brandon Johnson pretends to be.
And let's just also address one other thing. All these demonstrators that you've seen out here in recent days, all of these elderly white hippies, they're not part of the city and never have been. And by the way, most of the citizens who live in Washington, D.C. are black. This is not a city that has had any safety for its black citizens for generations. And President Trump is the one who is fixing that with the support of the Metropolitan Police Department, the support of the National Guard, and our federal law enforcement officers. So we're going to ignore these stupid white hippies that all need to go home and take a nap because they're all over 90 years old, and we're going to get back to the business of protecting the American people and the citizens of Washington, D.C.
But no, not at all. That's not celebrated at all. Instead, they want less police on the street. And we need to make investments in programs that apparently are helping the city of Chicago, which it isn't. It's not at all. Crime is still ridiculously high, right? It's ridiculously high, and they know it because they manipulate the stats. And we've gotten into all that already, so we don't have to belabor that point too much. But what I want to do next is go into his MSNBC interview that he did. In this interview, he's talking about his investments, like as he always likes to say, right? He's an NPC. He just speaks about the investments that he's made in the community, allegedly. And Joe Scarborough, he doesn't take away from that. He says all of the programs and stuff that you're talking about is great, but don't you think it would be nice to have some more police in the community, on top of those programs? And Brandon Johnson's inability to answer that simple question represents the entire issue with the Democrat Party overall. Their inability to just be honest and operate with common sense. And this is why people are leaving by the millions. Let's take a look at this video in closing of Brandon Johnson making a complete fool of himself. But then again, that isn't shocking because once again, we are talking about the man with the lowest approval rating, I think, in American history as far as the mayor is concerned, Mr. 6.6, because his approval rating in Chicago is 6.6%. That's crazy.
Mayor, those all sound like great programs. I'm curious, would you also like to get federal funding to help put 5,000 more cops on the street in Chicago? Would that help drive down crime?
Well, look, policing by itself is not the full strategy.
No, I understand that. You've talked about the other things you want, and I said those are good and important programs, but I'm asking also, would 5,000 more police officers on the street in Chicago be helpful to go along with all of those social programs that a lot of cities are engaging in and having success with?
Well, look, here's the best way I can put it, Joe, is that in the 90s when I was in high school, we had 3,000 more police officers and we had 900 people being murdered every single year in Chicago. It's just not policing alone. Of course, we want more detectives.
I know it's not policing alone, but I know it's not policing alone. You've told me everything else you want. I'm curious, and this does come down to an idea.
Scarborough's like, bro, shut the F up. Okay, shut up, bro. That is not the question that I'm asking you. All right. And you're avoiding the question. And this is precisely why Mr. 6.6%, represents all of the Democrat Party, and they're losing voters by the millions. I'm going to rewind it back just a little bit, and I'll be quiet. But this is just utterly insane. And this goes on for the next, I want to say, minute and a half. We're already a minute into this video. Brandon Johnson continues on to be an idiot for another minute and a half straight.
It's just not policing alone. Of course, we want more detectives.
I know it's not policing alone, but I know it's not policing alone. You've told me everything else you want. I'm curious, and this does come down to an ideological difference between people. Do you believe that the streets of Chicago would be safer if there were more uniformed police officers on the streets of Chicago?
I believe the city of Chicago and cities across America would be safer if we actually had, affordable housing. Look,
okay,
I'm not saying that
that's not the question I asked. My question is, and I just need a yes or a no, do you believe the streets of Chicago would be safer if you got all of those other extraordinary programs put back into place, which do have a history of being successful, if that's complemented by having 5,000 more cops on the streets of Chicago?
I don't believe that we should narrow it down to just police officers, Joe, is what I'm saying. That is an antiquated approach. I'm saying we've invested in detectives.
Mr. Mayor, are you hearing what I'm saying? I'm agreeing with you that all of these other social programs are extraordinarily important.
Let me explain something to you why this is happening, okay? Joe Scarborough doesn't respect Brandon Johnson. Nobody respects Brandon Johnson. Brandon Johnson has to be the biggest idiot associated with the Democrat Party since Kamala Harris. I mean, we're just talking about complete and utter idiots, just completely stupid. You only speak in talking points, and anything that deviates from outside of that, you don't know how to articulate yourself because you're completely disingenuous and you're just holding up the party line, and people are sick and tired of it. Joe Scarborough, he didn't go this hard on Westmore. Right. But then again, at the same time, when he was talking to Westmore wasn't as stupid as Brandon Johnson is, so I mean, because once again, we are talking about Brandon Johnson, but he doesn't respect him. That's why he's not letting him get that off. And in all actuality, he's truly trying to help, because we just need you to answer this question in a common sense way. And your refusal to do it is completely destroying the party. So he's actually trying to help, but Brandon Johnson is so stuck in his partisan ways that he just can't admit to what we all know is true. I'm telling you, I agree with all the programs and your investments that you love talking about. That's great. But on top of the investments, don't you think an extra 5,000 cops would help you a lot? Brandon Johnson won't do it. He won't answer the question. He won't do it. Let's finish this video out.
Is what I'm saying. That is an antiquated approach. I'm saying we've invested in detectives.
Mr. Mayor, are you hearing what I'm saying? I'm agreeing with you that all of these other social programs are extraordinarily important. I just need a yes or a no, and then this will be the last time I ask. If you get all of those other social programs that 800 million that New York City does, Los Angeles, other people do with great success, would an additional 5,000 cops on the streets in Chicago help complement those programs to make Chicago safer?
Look, we are working hard to make sure that our police department is fully supported. I don't believe that just simply putting out an arbitrary number around police officers is the answer. What I'm saying is policing and affordable housing. It's policing and mental and behavioral health care services. It's policing and youth employment. It's a full package.
Anyways, that does it with today's video. That does. I mean, what is there left to really say at this point, right? What is there left to say? There's really nothing left to say. The guy to my right, I think I might come across as your left. He said all that he needs to say. This is a dead party, right? Democrat Party is an anti-American party. They don't like you. They can't stand you. They only care about themselves, their own position of power, and their pockets. That's it. And you have morons like this guy here on the screen that will not deviate from the script if his life depended on it, because he is staunchly opposed to any and everything that will get in the way of lining up his pockets and keeping him his power and keeping him in power. And that is the Democrat Party in a nutshell. The irony is that those things that they hold so dear to, that have kept them in power for so long, is now working against them, but they're too stupid to realize that. So they're just going to keep paddling up creek against the current to no avail. And with all that being said, that does it for today's news. So I want to thank you guys for joining me today. Please hit the like button on your way out. Subscribe to the channel if you're new to the channel. Share this video on your social media platforms. And please do not forget to follow me on Telegram at TD Media Group. The link to my Telegrams in the description box below and pinned in the comment section as well. Thank you all for your time. And to the next video, peace and have a great afternoon.